Good morning or afternoon, and thank you to everybody for joining us today for our second webinar on buying groups. So speaking of it being the second webinar, in the first webinar, we talked a little bit about kind of the shift from focusing on a single individual with our marketing campaigns and moving to a focus on buying groups. The stats here from Gartner are pretty stark that if you're only focused on one person and getting to one person, it's going to be much harder for you to help that buying group get to consensus. Or you're going to get that one individual speaking with you or potentially turn them over to your sales team. And then they're going to have to try and get all the rest of the buying group members in consensus around your solution. And so really in this buying group world, it's a matter of marketers really thinking more about how am I going to get to that entire buying group? How am I going to enable them to make a decision and one that's in favor of our organization and putting us on that short list that they're going to consider to solve whatever issue it is that they currently have. So this was kind of the topic of the first conversation. We also talked about how to bring your entire team within your organization along with buying groups and why it is a shift that go-to-market teams everywhere should be really serious about making and those sorts of things. But, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we covered and some insights from that first one. But before I do, I would like to introduce you to the actual experts. I'm just the moderator for today, but I want to introduce you to the actual experts who will be speaking on today's session. So we have three RevOps, go-to-market ops, and engineering professionals with us. So first we have Brandie Marone, SVP of Revenue Operations from Intentsify. Hi, Brandie.
Hi.
And we have Andrea Frazier from Inverta, who is our RevOps lead and a senior consultant here of 5-6 years now? You've been here for quite some time.
Years. Yes, I have.
Years.
Hi, everyone.
Excellent. And then we have, last but certainly not least, we have Austin Sandmeyer from Sendoso, who you have recently kind of come into this new role, kind of given the changes that are happening within marketing and marketing organizations. So you are now handling go-to-market engineering at Sendoso.
Yeah, long title. You usually need to take a breath in the middle, but yeah, all kinds of fun stuff.
Excellent. Well, these three individuals have a lot of experience to share with us, which they will be coming up in just a few slides here. But as promised, there were a few more takeaways that I wanted to share from our first webinar. And so the first one, this is a little bit about who actually attended the first webinar. So as you can probably guess, if you don't already know, a move and a shift to buying groups is definitely not a single person initiative inside of an organization. There is a whole group of individuals, basically your whole go-to-market team that needs to make the shift to buying groups. What we found was in our first webinar, largely we had demand gen professionals show up, which is great. Obviously, this is something that is largely going to be initiated and probably even driven from a demand gen perspective, but there's sales, there's operations who definitely need to be on board. Sometimes there's finance and getting to your board with the message about this shift. And those sorts of people were not actually represented in attendees at our first webinar. However, we anticipated that. So as a group, we developed some materials to actually enable those demand gen individuals to go to the rest of those members of their go-to-market team and say, hey, we need to make this shift and here's why, right? So, we talked a lot about messaging and, those sorts of things in the first webinar. And one of those things was buyer enablement. And so as you can probably guess, we practiced a little bit of what we preached there. We anticipated that, kind of typically somebody who's going to be a champion was going to attend the first webinar, but we needed to enable them to bring the rest of their buying group along. And that is a core tenet and a core principle of this shift to buying groups. The other thing that came out, we did a couple of polls during our first webinar. And long story short, where we landed, after kind of all of those polls were done is basically everybody's in a little bit of analysis paralysis when it comes to buying groups. I think, given the number of people that actually registered for and attended the last webinar as well as this one, buying groups are top of mind, but I think a lot of folks are like, Yeah, it really sounds great, but where do we even get started, right? There's a lot that needs to change. We've been so keyed in and dialed into MQLs and individuals and, focusing on that champion for so long. How do we make this shift? Where do we even start? And so once again, we anticipated that would be a bit of what would come out of those conversations, which is why we hosted today's webinar. And we also built our complete guide to buying groups. And in there, we talk about the 7 discrete steps that are actually needed to make this transition. Obviously, you need to know who's on the buying group. You need to, as I alluded to earlier, you need to change your messaging in your campaigns to speak to the entire buying group. But there's 4 of the steps in particular that are very focused on rev ops and operations more generally. And that is what I have brought together our 3 key speakers from today's session to really talk about. So first, we're going to be talking about signals. Obviously in an MQL world, there's more, leads and those sorts of things. Or, a lot of people have kind of shuddered from signals because they think of signals as just being intent. And so this group is really going to talk about how signals are a whole lot more in intent than intent and really what you should do with them. Then they're going to talk about how to align all of your internal teams around this, right? Everybody's role on a go-to-market team needs to change when you're focused on buying groups and not just leads and MQLs. So they'll talk a little bit about that. Then I think probably where all 3 of their eyes will light up is when they start to talk about data and technology, right? This is really where if this stuff doesn't flow and doesn't work, all of this is a little bit dead in the water. And so they'll talk about that. And then last but not least, we'll talk about metrics, how you think about the metrics that everybody should be using to not only prove, success to others within the organization, but to really look at to improve their performance. So with that, I am now going to turn things over to our team of experts to start talking about the 4 topics that we've highlighted. So first up, signals. All right, gang, let's talk about signals. Who wants to go first?
I can go first, and I can jump in. I think we have all been swimming in signals, and it's been everywhere for a while. And before that, they were just called activities in some map somewhere, and they've changed names and done a lot of stuff over many, many years. And now they have the fun word of signals. But I think as you think about signals, the more impactful thing as all of these webinars and all these things think about is how do you marry them together to create groups, to create buying groups, to understand not just, massive usage or understanding in one person, but across multiple different personas, multiple different people, multiple different hierarchy levels. I think we had a prep call, I don't even know, a couple of weeks ago, and we were just diving into how many matrices you could go deeper with the signals. If you just do one, let's do web activity. You could do web activity for one person. You could do web activity for the department. You could do web activity for functions. You could do for seniority. You could do for geolocations. Large multinational companies had multiple different places. The matrix are kind of crazy. And I think that's one of the wild fun things about this is how you understand and comprehend the signals, which is what we'll talk about. But first off, what are some of the signals? I mean, I love all of these. We had a bunch else as well. Brandie, I think you were wanting to talk about one of them. I don't remember which one was your big one, but.
I can't remember what the big one was. I was just going to say, to me, I mean, it's honestly also taking the signals and what to do with them. You touched on it for just a second, right? But what are the triggers for those signals as well? So knowing what you're listening for, and then that ownership of who's doing what when a signal comes. I think it's just taking it a step further. Also, listening for signals across different areas within your business. So Austin, you mentioned web signals. There's also signals within your Gong conversations, internal signals of what are happening on your internal systems and CRM. So they're all over the place. And I think that's, even what Jessica was alluding to, that they're everywhere, right? You'd have to be set up and prepped to listen for them in all the systems that you have.
Yeah, I think one other thing that we were talking about was around how buying groups change as they move through a typical marketing funnel or a buying process. And, you might not have a ton of top level content for a CFO that's going to need to sign on the dotted line at stage 5 of your sales opportunity, but you are going to want to have something in the middle of the funnel and understand where they would access it and understand how they're going to be a part of the buying group. I think all of us know that we're, selling to many people and many people are part of a buying group. And so figuring out where, I think one thing that you always want to talk about when you talk about buying group is where does every single person come in and where are they like the main person in it and where do they take a supporting cast role? And so like understanding that maybe let's take a marketing tool, a demand gen manager might be a massive influencer, a massive champion at the beginning, but they might honestly, as they go into like stage 3, 4, 5 of that opportunity, they're kind of like a supporting cast person. They like started the ball rolling. They're going to become a main user of it, the platform probably, but like they are really not the one signing on the dotted line, doing the spec checks and all of that. There's other people that take up those like main supporting roles, and knowing where they're going to come. Maybe they're going to come in stage 4, 3 of that opportunity, and where you need to warm that CFO, that CMO up to, so that like when it comes to stage 3 and they become the main person, they've already gotten some supporting information and understanding like what that could be. That could be, blog posts on a website. That could be a send out that you give, like a, 1-page case study that gets sent to the CMO at a certain stage. That's just like warm up of what the brand does and stuff like that. Or if you're running a PLG motion, product usage, like maybe maybe you don't really need to introduce the CMO to this platform because they're never actually going to log into, but maybe you create a trigger that sends a usage stat out to the CMO in that like warm up process. So they can see into it, have visibility and be like, oh, this is cool. Like I would probably turn these off immediately, but I know that it's coming and I can see it, what's going on. And so starting to interact with that and creating the buying group dynamic, I think like that's really what you want to start looking for, is like, where do these signals come? Where should they be prioritized? Like if we have, a bunch of terms of service pings on our website for a stage 1 op, I would assume that their legal and IT is reviewing us pretty aggressively. So they're probably not really a stage 1 op. They're probably significantly deeper in that funnel, or like they've already started the procurement process internally and trying to read and understand those signals.
Yeah. It's like we talk all the time about multi-threading, right? This is how to execute on that multi-thread. I think it lays the foundation for it. And as you start thinking about multi-threading, that's just a term that we put on our salespeople or BDRs all the time. And now no, this is how you execute. These are the signals that you look for. These are the roles that you want to engage with throughout an organization, no matter how big or small.
Well, and I would say, I don't know, a little bit more anecdotally, like we don't often get chances to be creative like this, right? So I think I really encourage clients to think big, right? Like what are those signals? Obviously, we have some examples here, and those are very good examples. And we have a lot of, use case and experience with some of these very specific signals. But I think the really cool part and the piece that I would really reiterate is you don't have to know it all correctly at once, right? You can think creatively, even think abstractly about what those signals might be. Try it out, and you can continue to iterate on what those are as you're kind of discovering new ones and seeing the value, or perhaps not seeing the value of certain ones as well. So I think that's just an exciting thing to also frame it as an opportunity to have some creativity in what you're listening for.
And one thing that I would say, like, if you're thinking about this and you're like, I don't know where to start, like this is overwhelming, I don't know where to start. One thing is you could look at maybe your entry and exit criteria for your stages of marketing or stages of that sales process. Those are often going to have, all right, AE, you have hopefully talked about procurement and you've talked about the finance person at this point. You're going to know where they're supposed to be involved, where the CMO should be involved. Do you have your ATL? Do you have your BTL? And so you can use those things and go backwards and be like, okay, hopefully we see a signal, whether that's a web activity, maybe it's an automation we send off. Like you can use that as like your groundwork of like, okay, if the AE is supposed to involve the CMO in stage 2, we need to look for signals prior to that. We should be identifying stuff. What does that look like? That would be a great way to kind of give you like, okay, how do I understand signals based off, my sales process today?
Yeah. I think one other place to kind of tag your signals to is to your ICP. So what I mean by that is if you know there's a certain persona that is going to be successful with your product or your solution, you should make sure that you have signals that track those individuals, right? So I have, network with other demand gen professionals. And, I was talking to one woman, she said that she gets it as specific as if an account on their prospect list hires a CFO from a particular size company, they're going to be much more likely to be interested in and successful with their product than other types of CMOs. So talk about getting really specific, but that goes back to their ICP. They know that certain types of CFOs are going to be successful with their product. And so that's what they figured out how to track signals on. Right. So to your point, get creative. The sky's the limit with it.
Yeah.
Because, right. Go ahead, Austin.
I love that. No, exactly. I was thinking about that. That kind of falls into this business event. Some of these are like pretty large buckets to think through, like business event. There's a ton of them. You could do hiring a CFO. They got acquired. They changed their ownership structure. They launched a new product. Like there's so many things that you could do here. Just to give like another frame of reference, like you could do it for they are being acquired or a majority got acquired by a PE. And then you can identify like what type of PEs, is it growth, is it efficiency, and then you can imagine what might they be next, like what would they be installing in terms of their management team and how are they going to act, and then you can understand what best assets, what best buying group is going to be involved. I would imagine if you're on an efficiency PE backed company that your CFO and your finance team and your accounting team are going to be super involved and very involved in all those buying processes. And that could be amazing. So you have a great material and great assets and great signals you're watching for, or it could be like, I have no idea. I need to start building out some of this stuff because that's kind of our target audience.
Which I think is, sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Brandie.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to say, I think that's a great point too, right? Like flagging those incomplete groups early, right? Identifying what signals are you missing, filling those gaps. I think that's another big piece of it. It's not just always responding to the signals that are out there, but what are we missing? What do we need to add for? I'm probably going to, move into the next slide, but I think that it's huge to align on what the signals are across your teams as well, right? That don't create these signals and listen for them in a vacuum. Make sure that you're constantly working through this with all of your groups. So sorry,
Brandie, that was
you're welcome.
Beautiful transition. Beautiful. And I'm sure signals are going to come up kind of as we talk through the rest of this presentation as well, especially when we get to the data side of things. But I think that's a great transition, is really getting to, so if marketing thinks those are all the signals, but sales doesn't agree, right? You're going to have a problem, right? So, but that's just one aspect of the alignment, right? There's alignment within your marketing team. There's alignment between your marketing and your sales organizations. There's alignment within sales, right? There's a lot of alignment that needs to happen here with anything, as with any sort of shift in a marketing strategy. I mean, let's be clear, this was one of the main tenets of the move when we made the move to account-based marketing, right? You had to get everybody aligned around it, right? Same thing here with buying groups, is you need to get everybody aligned. So once again, now I'm going to turn it over to my operations professionals to really talk about what's all involved and really maybe where some of those sticking points are.
Sure. I would say, for me personally and at our organization, I have the BDRs under our group. And so that's a big shift, moving BDRs and that role from going after the lead, the speed to lead, the response time that people are going after that individual, to really, how do I build and validate that buying group? How do I know who's missing from the group, right? Who do I need to go after next, and creating that portfolio of each account. So on the first webinar, they talked about, how this aligns with ABM strategy and all of that. So really targeting your accounts, understanding what those groups look like, what are the roles that you need, that you're missing, the messaging for all of it. It almost elevates that BDR role. And, in today's world with AI chatbots, AI BDRs, right? This creates that new, expectation, higher level for a BDR, kind of spending more time researching, understanding, personalizing, not all what the computer can do for them.
Yeah, 100%. I think even in that vein, if we keep walking down that, just like that shift from a BDR perspective is also like, this is not just aligning your internal teams of like what they do now and how they change, but like also this frequently is a conversation of how they're comped, how are they measured, how are they performed. That we'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides, but like that's a massive element of how you're aligning. If you're aligning around buying groups and trying to and you're allowing BDRs to set multiple meetings per account? How are they being comped per account? Is it, there's a ton of, stuff that gets opened up there, but making sure that you align on that. And I think like everything, it is a constantly evolving picture. Typically for most people, you'll set something and it'll be, this is our best picture. And then you'll realize in a month in that, we need to change something or sooner. And so I think like that's another big element of aligning. The other thing I wanted to hit on from an alignment perspective is like the key people often are your marketers, your BDRs, your sales leaders, your customer support teams. But I also think that a very important element align your teams is often your SMEs. And this comes back into whatever it is. Like previously at HR tech company, our biggest thing was making sure that our CHROs, our head of HR, all of those people were also involved in our buying committee in the manner of they're not jumping on the calls talking about specifically our thing. They're connecting with their CHR over at the company. They're connecting with their head of HR via LinkedIn or sending them a quick message like, saw you were over here, because we all operate in circles and networks, and realistically all the networks and circles are relatively small, and so the relationships matter. And so making sure that you align your team, this isn't just like buying group building, but it's more along like ABM, buying group building, all kind of combined, and just like we're humans selling to humans, and we want to talk to other humans that are doing the same problems and challenges as us. And I think that's really important as well when it comes to aligning your team. One of the biggest things that we do at Sendoso is we align field marketer to field marketer, demand gen to demand gen, and allow them to engage with the rest of the account in that manner, so that we're building and allowing. Because if I'm a field marketer talking to another field marketer, we have a lot of the same pain points, and it might not be exactly directed to Sendoso, but we both talk about how much we hate buying carpet and the electricity bill when we go to a trade show and all that stuff. Like those will develop in nature in the relationship to when that field marketer has a question about Sendoso, they will know exactly where to go, ask this question, no matter how they feel about it. And so that's another big element of aligning your internal teams to ensure that the buying committee is getting the right people together.
Yeah. I would also say, sorry.
No, I was just going to say from a marketer's perspective, like it's not just marketing as a monolith, like, hey, marketing, market to buying groups, right? It's like, hey, how does content need to change their strategy when it comes to addressing a full buying group? And what does field need to do, right? They need to create events for specific buying group roles, right? Or maybe try and foster where they bring multiple roles together in one room, right? So everybody in marketing needs to think differently about how that they operate and the types of programs they put together. Andrea, actually, Brandie, I cut you off, and then Andrea, I can see you're on mute, but you're ready to jump in.
And what you said, I mean, aligns with what I was going to say just around, we've implemented account planning, territory planning, bringing those groups together, like physically forcing the alignment of teams and the conversation, that feedback loop of, Austin mentioned the customer support department, right? Making sure that you are constantly evolving and innovating on what those signals are, who do we need in the buying group when we're going after accounts. So I think that it's also a great time, Jessica, to what you just said of assigning ownership, right? Making sure you know who is responsible for what within your teams so that they can go and, set up for success across all departments. Sorry, Andrea, I'll let you go.
No, actually, I was going to say exactly that. Is just that consistent feedback loop, right, is really important, because what, people are experiencing in this change at the beginning of it, it's a lot different than when they're getting more used to asking, at the most basic level. We're now introducing the layer of asking the question of who else is involved in this decision, right? And just that change of perspective, the longer you go along this shift towards a buying group type motion, that context and the information that you can share between these teams to further improve and show value in this sort of transition is going to be different too. So definitely continue to have those conversations and be open to the idea of iterating and improving and taking all that feedback forward.
Right.
Yeah. One example I wanted to pull up was actually based off what you mentioned, Jessica, was around how making sure all your marketing teams are speaking to the other people that are also now on this buying committee versus just the champion or, the potential super user at the end. One of the examples that I had was at a previous HR tech company. So CHRO was our primary buyer persona, some operations people. One of the best side events that we would do was typically for account progression was we sold into hospitality spaces at the time, was going to the leading hospitality conferences that are specifically focused on revenue and finance. So we were going to like finance, hospitality conferences, and we were having side dinners around how to have conversations and how to think about buying, in theory, buying our platform, but really about the challenges and creating a new budget line and why this matters and how it would affect it on the ROI. And we would host dinners. And those were some of the most account progressing dinners that we had that moved those deals forward so fast. But like, talk about thinking about like a completely different thing. Like, we are selling CHRO software to hospitality spaces, and we are at a finance, how to invest in hospitality, pretty much conferences.
Yeah, but your content team probably had to produce content
100%.
to fuel that event, right?
Yep,
So,
exactly.
oh yeah, it's a team effort, that's for sure.
It is. We're not just passing off a lead anymore and then moving on, right? We're all intimately involved in this process.
Absolutely. All right. Well, now let's get into the topic core, near and dear to every operations professional's heart and mind, is around technology and data. So, Andrea, why don't you kick us off here and talk a little bit about how you think about, we've got a lot of questions here. Like, if you're a demand gen professional and you're the one spearheading this, like, what should you go talk to your operations team about? But why don't you kick us off, and then we'll go from there on this topic of technology and data.
Yeah. So, going back to my first comment around being creative, I think this is all relevant here too, right? So when we start thinking, I think oftentimes I see a lot of people get almost scared of all of the options, right? There's so many data points and signals that you could pull into this. And specifically thinking about that first bullet, what is the definition of an MQA? Rather than allowing you to get spun up about how complicated that could potentially be, right? A mix of signals. How do you get those signals to be weighted a certain way, et cetera, et cetera? I think, really a lot of the times I'm reiterating the same thing, which is don't let that deter you from progress, right? Thinking of doing that iterative approach is always better. And I think knowing that answer is going to change over time is just important. So kind of a broken record with what I've already shared, but I do think that is just really paramount here, because there's no reason that these questions should scare you or delay you in moving things forward. Because again, it's a collaborative thing. And I think these types of questions need to be surfaced early so that you can have the most complete answer from all of the cross-functional teams that are now going to be collaborating in a new way.
I think it's a big point, right? Like, don't be scared. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think, I've even talked to some of our customers, large electronics organizations, right? Where messy data, incomplete, all of that, don't know how to connect the tools. Just start somewhere. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the perfect tools. The data model doesn't need to be set up before you kick this off. You can, Andrea was saying, reiterate, right? I'm thinking iterate. Just keep improving, keep making changes. You're going to learn throughout this process. And your definition of an MQA might change. It might be, it might be different by account. It might be different by buying group. I think that, you just have to be prepared for it. It's a new way to engage, and setting up the technology to support it shouldn't be a daunting action, right? Like, don't be scared. Just get going and, run it in parallel with what you have already set up. I think, we've talked about MQLs, like, that doesn't go away. Keep that running, and then just layer this in on top of it.
Yeah, I think I think the general consensus here is keep it simple to start with, and run and start moving forward. And I think your definition of an MQA could be, here's the 3 people that I know we need to have that buy it. And I know that this one submitted a demo request, or I did something, went to an event, and I know the 2 other people that, we know the name and the email address of the 2 other people. Awesome. The people, potentially your buying committee. In a world, that's fine. That could be your MQA definition to begin with. And then and then you start and run with that. And then you come back and okay, we would like to know these things and see if they've engaged in this thing. Awesome. Start somewhere, always iterate. Keep shipping and doing new things and trying new things. Maybe you think it's these 4 people that are in your buying committee, and you've been using this buying group for 2 years, and nobody's actually looked back at your closed ones and said, are these even the people that are on this? And you can do that now. Start doing that. You don't have to, evaluate every single op and look at each contact and click each Salesforce activity. Just take a few, understand them. It doesn't need to be daunting. Just start simple, and you can always progress from there.
Well, and Austin, and all of you, I think this brings up a good point, is just if you aligned around an MQL definition in 2020 and never refined it since then, right? You've got some big problems, right? Because the market has changed around you, what you sell has changed, right? Those sorts of things. And so, just like this, your sophistication, I think a lot of what you guys were touching on is your sophistication around MQAs, and just buying groups is going to get better and better over time. But the market around you is also going to change. And so don't lock yourself into an MQA definition and say, this is the definition forevermore. This is stuff that you need to be looking at every 6 months to at least every year to make sure that you're adapting and adjusting to the market and, your place in it.
100%. Markets are always changing. It's constant change. I think I logged into one of my colleagues, friends, account scoring model. And the data that account scoring model was ran on was 2023 data. And I was like, I would assume that a lot has changed since 2023. If you just look at the world in 2023 and today's world, just the world itself has changed. So we should probably evaluate that. Even if you kept the exact same sales process, I promise you there's some significant changes here. So just looking at it and reevaluating it on a very regular basis and just having a cadence, whether that is every 6 months or at the end of each quarter, you have a meeting with your teams and your execs that are like, who are we selling to? Is there any shift in priority? Is there any change? Are we changing the ACV? Are we doing these things to go up market supposedly? And who needs to be in part of that? And talk through not just what you're seeing, but also where you want to go. Because that will affect your MQA. Where you want to go and what market you want to go into and how you're changing that, whether you're going downstream, upstream, anywhere, there will be differences, and that will change the way your MQA gets affected.
Love it. All right. So let's really quickly, because I know everybody always loves a good tech stack shot. So we talked a little bit about kind of some of the considerations around your technology, but let's dig into some technologies in particular. So first, we're going to start with you, Brandie. Let's talk about Intentsify's tech stack and how you've thought about it as it relates to a shift to buying groups.
Sure. And I think, nobody's tech stack is set up for buying groups. So we have to jerry-rig it to make it work, pull in the information. That's why everything we've talked about leading up to this of identifying the signals, aligning the teams, right? Defining that MQA, setting that up is going to become really important when you start implementing and integrating your tech. You can see here we have just the, best of breed, some of the high level engagement tools, CRM tools. And Austin said it, right? Start simple. Don't think that you have to have everything out there, everything listening, everything connected with workflows and triggers across the board. You just need to figure out what matters, right? I'm looking at, what is my first priority? What can a rep see? Who's engaged? What roles are missing? What to do next, right? Those are the big key pieces of information that I'm trying to get from the tech stack. So do they have that visibility? I'm also looking at that when I said what to do next, can my systems answer that for me? Can it provide that insight for the reps? I think there's so much technology out there now with AI and trying to do things automatically for the team. I'm old school. I like to start with the basics and then really start to iterate, as you can hear the common theme here, add on, right? Only to improve, only to make things easier for the team. I don't want to give them more platforms to log into, more things to have to search through. I want it in their face, easy to use, easy to action as quickly as possible. So trying to keep it simple, sticking with what Austin's saying, with the end result, and I know we're going to go into metrics later, but how can we get higher quality opportunities and just higher close rates, right? It might take more work on the front end, but that is our ultimate goal. And you can do it with a very consolidated group of tech.
Awesome. All right. So Austin, you're up next. Talk about your tech stack.
Yeah, I like to say keep it simple, and then you show this, and I'm like, oh, just kidding. No, I promise you, we do keep it simple. It's just this slide is a little everywhere, all over, and I use it a few different places, so I tried to tweak it. But yeah, so this is our tech stack. This is typically a favorite slide for people, and the big things that we think about is how do we identify and how do we find a lot of the buying group and the rest of that MQA to understand who also is typically involved. And so that comes down to that acquisition and contact acquisition. And then it comes down to the signals, like where are these signals coming in from? They're coming from everywhere. How do you measure them? How do you understand them? Did they visit your preference page and click unsubscribe? What type of signal is that? And how does that affect your scoring and some of the stuff that was on the previous slide? That's obviously probably, it's in there. It's a part of it. And so this is kind of how we think about it. So there's a ton of data and signal stuff on the left-hand side and third-party signals. I think we've talked about it multiple different times, and it's something that I harp on constantly, is in today's world with AI, there is a ton of great third-party signals all over the place. We know XYZ changed jobs, this person moved this company, they got acquired by a PE firm, XYZ, this is their tech stack, all of that is out in the world. It's a great tool, and you should use it to fill in areas that you don't understand. But where we see a lot of the best bang for our buck right now is our first-party signal. So like, is there emails? Is there Salesforce information that we have on them? Did they evaluate us previously? Did they work at a place that evaluated us or had us previously? Are they currently working, maybe someone on their team has used us at another company. That is stuff that like really you're only going to see in your own CRM or your own product activity data or those types of things. That is the juiciest data and the stuff that we use significantly in our scoring models to identify, like, if you used us before, that's awesome. That's big plus on that. If you have bought us before and you were on an opportunity and contract, 10s across the board. And so those are things that we kind of think about when it comes to first party data. Did you evaluate us? Did you pick a competitor? Those are things that we think about as well. And that comes into kind of the intelligence area in the middle there, where we're talking about, how do we score this account? How do we score that contact on engagement, on fit? How did they buy us previously? Did they not buy us? What's their demographic? How many employees do they have? Stuff like that. And then personalization is very common for us. We use a lot of different personalization tools, and then it follows into the outbound kind of AE tech stack on the top, and then a lot of the marketing kind of tech stack on the bottom. And those are kind of the motions on how we think about building the buying committee and understanding, like, the bread and butter where we see a ton of value, as I mentioned, is in the first party information, because that is yours. Nobody's going to go and know that Brandie bought Sendoso at another company. Nobody knows that unless Brandie goes and says it somewhere. And then they go and scrape everything she's ever said in the world and then compare it, which is pretty hard and challenging today. So the first party data is a true unlock. And I think it allows you to understand your buying group and your buying committee and stuff pretty well. But I'm also speaking that is 6 versions in the future of an MQA. You don't start, we have gone through this evaluation many different times. You don't need to start with that information. You can start with who are the people that we need in this buying group and then advance upon that. This is a little bit more, it's a lot versus keeping it simple, but it's a lot of we've evaluated this on multiple different, rounds, I would guess.
Amazing. So Andrea, we didn't actually put our tech stack up here because we're a small firm. So our tech stack isn't all that extensive, but you actually have the collective knowledge of dozens of clients you have worked with. And so, obviously Brandie and Austin covered a ton here, but is there anything else you'd like to add that you've seen when you've been working with clients that maybe they haven't touched on yet?
Absolutely. I would say, oftentimes we get the idea, and I love tools. I love MarTech like any RevOps person would, right? But I would just reiterate the idea of not needing to wait till you have the perfect tech stack to start moving towards this, right? We've heard countless times, Jess, oh yeah, we'll do that once we implement this new tool, or after we get our team using Gong.
Cringe.
It just pains me so much because, like we mentioned with AI, I think the barrier to get started is a lot lower. Right. And we saw it with the just adoption of AI. The whole messaging out there was just try it and fail. I would say the same applies here. Right. It's not making it bigger in your head than it needs to be, and realizing that scrappy, in the case of our tech stack, right, is also fine and can also support and enable a buying group motion like this. So if you're seeing these beautiful tech diagrams and are thinking, dang, we don't look anything like that, that is fine. In fact, in some ways, it's cheaper, right? And you might still have positive results. So just something to think about if you maybe have aspirational hopes for a tech stack like this, but are feeling a little insecure about where you're at today.
Yeah, start simple and grow with your strategy. All right. So the fourth topic we promised we were going to cover was around metrics, right? And so, God, we could go way deep on this. But talk a little bit about how, once again, I don't want to say the A word as an attribution because that makes my head hurt. But I do want to talk about what should marketing teams in particular be looking at to improve their performance. What should be those metrics now? It's not just number of MQLs that they're hitting. And, then we started to look at the funnel and like, okay, what are our conversion rates from MQL to, MQO and, so on and so forth. But what really should you be looking at to say we're nailing it as a marketing team?
I think for me, we need to stop measuring in volume and start measuring in buying group progress, right? Like really, it's not the number of leads, it's how are you expanding, right? How are you engaging across these different roles? So the complete buying group, getting all of those people together, making sure that you've identified all of them are just new metrics to start to push the team towards. I think if you don't identify these new metrics, if you don't change them up front, by default, your team is just going to go back to the old funnel, the MQL, the old way of doing it. So it's really important. It's hard with these 4 topics. Which one do you do first, right? It's almost like you have to do all of them at the same time because you need to know what you're going after so you can implement those metrics right away. I think it's, it's no longer just lead scoring, it's engagement scoring. It's how are we engaging? How are we, creating those complete groups. And back to the simple, right? Just define 3 to 4 things out of the gate. Don't go too big. There's always going to be, deal size, win rate, the conversion of MQA to opportunity. But I think, the buying group completeness and like multi-role engagement, those are, some of the core ones to start with. And then, as we keep saying, iterate, improve, change as you grow this.
100%. I think like as you alluded, quality over quantity, which has been something we've said forever. And I think that's just even more and more true here, especially as we go into AI land. And man, quantity is easy. Quality is where the biggest challenge comes in. And I think like this is a great screenshot here of like, this is a really sophisticated type motion that you could be into. You could go beyond this, but this is sophisticated. You could start with roles engaged. In your CRM, how many have had activities in the past 90 days? Put a percentage there of your key buyer personas. That could be how you start this process. Like that could be it. Do we have the people in the system and are they at all doing anything? Like it's usually the typical scoring models are typically like fit and engagement. And so like, is there a fit? Is there engagement? And then there's 100 other ones you can go off of. But and then like there to the right of it, there's like critical roles missing, what's missing and stuff like that. And like there you have your engagement and intent trends kind of going. And then there's like AI summaries and there's all kinds of stuff that you could add on and make things pretty. But I think at the end of the day, the biggest stuff is like, are you engaging the right people? It's not, can I get the 300 marketers at Amazon in my account? Can I get the 1 or 2 marketers and the 1 or 2 salespeople and the 1 or 2 finance people involved at Amazon that I need?
Yeah. Awesome.
One thing I always say about metrics, right, is kind of stepping back. You really need to think of it as like, if you're going to change the metrics, it's a behavioral shift, right? So if we're continuing to hear questions from leadership about MQLs and volume, that is not going to help this. So I would say just an underpinning of all of this is making sure that you're messaging appropriately, that behavior shift, you're helping train your leadership team to be asking the right questions, because I think without that, you're going to keep coming back to volume. You're going to keep coming back to the dreaded A word, attribution being, the only thing people want to hear about. So I think I can't reiterate enough the importance of knowing that a change in metrics is fundamentally a behavior shift in how we are thinking about things. So just something to ponder and consider as you're interacting with your stakeholders and especially with leadership. Like, are you helping them understand what questions they should be asking under this new motion?
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, just before we get to Q&A, but please do we've been getting questions along the way, but if you have any more, please put those in the Q&A. And I just wanted to point out, so in the Documents tab on the right-hand side of your screen, we do have a number of resources, and one that we created specifically for today's session is the checklist. Now you might look at it and go, God, it looks like there's a lot of line items there. But it is more of a checklist so that to make sure that you dot all your I's and cross all your T's when it comes to buying groups. And once again, it's not going to be perfect out of the gates, but it gives you the directional, fortitude of where to go, where to take this, where to start. Because like I said, a lot of people, it's the analysis paralysis that I think is stopping them from making the move. So this checklist should hopefully help you get there. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into some of our questions. So Megan, who's backstage, has been curating our Q&A. So if you can go ahead and share our first question for our panelists, that would be great. All right, so how do you get buy-in for the full go-to-market shift when it involves so many teams or you can't prove that this will work? All right, who wants to start on this one? This is a biggie.
Personally, I've slow rolled it, right? So while you might not be able to get full buy-in from the beginning because it is a big shift, even in the last webinar, they talked about running things in parallel, right? Keeping that MQL funnel, keeping that going. I think that it is... It doesn't go away. It will naturally and organically, right, start to become irrelevant over time. And then it allows you to prove that this is working. So it's, I hate to say it sounds like a lot of work to do this at the same time, but if you already have an MQL funnel in motion in place, they don't go away. And that, allows your go-to-market team to see how buying groups can help move deals forward, get more qualified opportunities. So you prove it while you're building it and implementing.
Yeah, I'll just tag on one quick thing. Slow rolling is the easiest way. I think the takeaway from this webinar is start simple and just do a couple things at a time. And then around how do you prove it'll work. Unless you are B2B SaaS or B2C and you're just like one-click consumer, I would assume that your sales leaders know that more people than just one needs to be on the committee to buy this thing. And so it comes back to okay, we are already engaging an account, a buying group. How do we think about marketing being involved in that and how that can improve and help that? And so it's just kind of around how the frame is, I would say.
Well, and the other thing too is you can't prove that it will work. You probably actually already have the data that proves that it does. Right? If you do deep dives on kind of the hygiene of your deals, closed won versus closed lost, you look back at the deal cycles, how much marketing engagement was there, how many different stakeholders were involved in the buying group, those sorts of things. If you start to look backwards and say, hey, actually, when we have 5 people involved pre the opportunity going to sales versus only 1 or 2, we're 2.5 times more likely to actually close that deal. That's where you start to get people's attention and go, it's already working on accident. So what if we actually retooled our go-to-market to focus on this? Imagine how much more successful we could be. So, all right. The next question, activating the buying group is typically a B or SDR function. How have you sold this narrative to AEs? Any learnings to land across tier 1, 2, or 3? Ooh, anyone?
Are you asking sold it to AEs so that they can start doing this as well? I think, or selling that it works from the BDR and the shift in how they're operating. I think that, AEs want good quality opportunities and meetings, right? So if you're getting them more meetings with the roles and the personas and the people that they need to, multi-thread throughout their deals, if that is the charter of the BDR SDR team, is to really build those groups, you're setting your AEs up for success earlier on, right? We've just shifted it from AEs typically get that first meeting, build an opportunity, and then start adding the buying groups later, even Salesforce is set up for it with contact roles associated to the opportunity. We're just shifting that to the front end, right? Elevating the BDRs, providing that buying group, all of that engagement for the AEs before they even get, before they create that opportunity. So selling it, or selling that narrative, or proving that it works, is a pretty organic, easy thing to do.
I also just think this is a good opportunity to kind of flip some of the feedback we've been hearing for years around MQLs on its head and use it as like a pitching point for why this is important. Like, yes, sales, we heard you. You don't have enough context to go off of when you just get one person. Good news. This is a treasure trove at the most basic level of more context that you can pull on to help move this deal forward. So I often use that as a way to get excitement and backing from sales leaders specifically, because we've been hearing the feedback, right? This is what you asked for in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, and this points out the shortcoming in account-based marketing, right? So they were upset because we were sending over too many MQLs that were unqualified and weren't really ready to buy. And then we moved to accounts and we're like, great, this account is ready. And they're like, but who in this account? Right? So now this is taking the best, it's the next evolution, and it's taking the best accounts with the best buying groups and saying, okay, here we go. Now we're ready. Now we're ready to roll with this account. And we've already got the buying group warmed up for you, right? Not just that champion. And you have to go do all the work to sell everybody else. All right. How about one more question here? One of the speakers mentioned shifting from measuring MQLs to engaging across different roles. What specifically are you measuring? Number of buying group members, number of engagements, number of sales touch points, all of those things? Who wants to tackle this one? I think Austin, I feel like I saw in the chat somewhere you answered something similar to this, but.
Yeah, I can start, and then Brandie, I think, can fill in some circles because I think she was speaking about it. But yes, oftentimes MQAs are roll-ups of MQLs, and it's not crazy. There's a bunch of, smaller intricacies and things like that. But when you're thinking about how do you engage accounts, it's typically how do you engage people? Because at the end of the day, it's not an account. It's just a bunch of people that work together and know each other and humans. So how do you engage them? And it's often, what type of engagement or activities are they individually having that would classify them as engaged as a person? Then how many of those people are doing that number of activities at that account? And oftentimes then there's account information involved as well, which is the fit, the demographics, all that type of stuff. But oftentimes when it comes to an MQA, it's they've done X number of things in the past 90 days. Maybe that's a longer time frame for your finance function because they're not probably going on your website every day. And it's shorter for other functions. So there's changes in what an MQL that would roll into an MQA could mean per function per your buying committee, but that's typically the shift, I would say. Brandie, what were you kind of leaning in there?
Yeah, I think, and you answered it in the chat, right? I think engagement is, just standard engagement that we're already seeing, right? Engaging with forums and website and webinars and all of that, all of those signals that we talked about earlier are they responsive? Are they actively, somebody who is, responding to the content that you're putting out there? I think the other thing, shifting from measuring MQLs, engaging across different roles, I think it's also what I was saying is making sure the completeness of that buying group is done, right? I think that is one of the big measurement points for me is, do we have everybody identified and then are they engaged, right? I think that is the big point. It's not just sending emails to those people. Are they responding to them? Is the message resonating with them? I think that's another key point, is that your message needs to be the same. What is the value that you're trying to provide? And then change that message based on the person themselves. So same message that everybody is gravitating towards, but might be just said in a different way, depending if you're dealing with the decision maker, the procurement person, right? Or your champion. So I think it's, to me, it's more of, are they actively responding? Are they, touching on your content? And then do you have everybody in that group already identified? I think once you have those things, selling the deal becomes very simple.
Yeah, it's less about how many emails you send them. It's how many emails are they responding to. Did they create web activity off of it? Were there clicks that weren't bot clicks coming in? Like it's that's the stuff that drives up engagement scoring. So just be mindful if you just run an activities report, what type of activities you're pulling in.
I know I said this was the last question, but I've seen it now in both the chat and the Q&A. And so let's just do one quick round robin. So a lot of people are saying, okay, where would you start? Right? Like if you've got it as a RevOps person, where would you get started? So apart from downloading our guide and our checklist, that would be step number one. What if your CRO or your CMO came to you and said, we got to make this shift, where would your head go? Okay, this is the lightning round. So Andrea, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Where would you go first?
I would probably start with framing and messaging, right? And just getting people excited for the idea. I think that's just paramount. So starting to think about what are ways that this is going to be the most beneficial for them, like what are the value adds for the different people that are going to be involved, and making sure that you're having those conversations early, just planting the seed. I think that's always and should be number one.
Love that.
And I come from a different perspective, right? I think you'll probably get it maybe based on our background. To me, it's the data model, and like what information are we trying to collect? What do we need to know? Setting that up first is where I would start, because then everything to me starts to flow into that, and you can start tracking and measuring right away.
Oh man, we're all going to start from different places. We'll have 3 different answers. There you go. 3 things to start with. Mine would be walking through your sales process and understanding who is in your buying committee and what is being engaged today, because that is the ground level of like, do we have the content, and then do we have the data? And those are the things you'll marry together. But like, if you walk through your sales process and you talk with your top AEs that are doing multi-threading, you're going to know who they engage with, who they don't engage with, and when they engage with them. And that'll help you understand kind of where these people need to be prioritized and what content we have or don't have.
Awesome. Well, I love that you all came with 3 different things, because that's perfect, because one person asked what are the first 3 things. So I think we covered that, plus each of your own personal favorites. So awesome. We've got 2 minutes to spare. So I think we're going to give everybody a little bit of a break until their next meeting, all of 2 minutes. But thank you all so much. This was a great conversation. Hopefully this gave everybody a little bit of food for thought, things to think about, to hopefully get them past that analysis paralysis and to starting to actually interacting and engaging in buying group marketing. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.